Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Hello and welcome to Ethical Perspectives. I am your host, Quinn Pettifer with the Gazette, and very proud to be here today. Today's topic is Then and Now, your public library. We're going to talk a little bit, actually, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the evolution of the public library and its uses through the ages. And just as important, as we're looking today and into tomorrow, how a community utilizes their public library. So I have to say this is my second time hosting Ethical Perspectives, and I am 2 for 2 with an all-female cast. So I am very excited about that, and especially excited about a dynamic female panel here today. With me, immediately to my left, I've got Dara Schmidt with the Cedar Rapids Public Library, Libby Slappey, who is president of the Friends of the Cedar Rapids Public Library, and last but not least, Hollie Trenary with the Marion Public Library. Thank you so much for joining me today and talking through this. So let's talk a little bit about the origin of the public library to get some perspective here, because in its earliest inceptions, really that common space, that access to knowledge, to education, to resources was really the founding principles of the public library. Let's fast forward a little bit and talk about the library and the evolution of the library within the last 15 to 20 years. And Dara, you want to start us off?
It's been a fascinating trend to watch things start from community space and information, and then go to really information heavy for a very long time, and then go back to that combination of community space and information. And so, having the library and the librarians be for a very long time gatekeepers of information, and now they are navigators of information, because there is so much out there. And when things changed and everything went to computers and digital, and there were libraries in the 90s where you had 2 or 3 computers and they had the internet on them, and it was like the coolest thing possible.
And how special is that?
And now there are entire rooms filled, and between our 2 locations, the Cedar Rapids Public Library has 124 public computers today, and so that's a huge change.
So that information base is still there, and that access to resources, it's just the look of the resources has changed throughout the. And Libby, how about you? How just from a 15 to 20 years looking at where we are now versus back then?
And in the case of the Cedar Rapids Public Library, certainly the 2008 flood was a real, it was a monumental change in who we were and how we served people, and I say we, the collective of the public library. And I think that once the new library was built, people came to the library because they wanted to see the new library, and they hadn't been there previously. And I think that shift, that gave people a chance to say, wow, I haven't been in a public library in a long time. It's really different now. And they could see the range of services and offerings. And our public library truly is a community space because it's a public library.
Absolutely. And we'll get into utilization here in a little bit. But Hollie, from a Marion perspective, because just kind of that all central perspective from 15 to 20 years to today, what are your thoughts?
So this is kind of top of mind for us as we're talking about the space and how our library has functioned from the beginning. The current library was built in 1996, and we were just talking that 1994 was when the World Wide Web became a thing, right? So in 1994, we were just starting to see websites and internet searches, and so that's the year that library was built, and then it was still about print. Just as Dara was saying about the 90s, there was a tiny little room that we still have in the Marion Library that was a computer lab that had, I think at its most, 10 computers in there. And just in a short 13 years later or so, not even, in 2007, 10 years later, we had the iPhone, and Netflix started streaming shows and movies, and all the way up to where we are now. Like I think we were talking earlier before we started, nothing is going to move any slower than it does right now. And so libraries have to be flexible and be able to adapt to that change. And the spaces that we have and how we utilize that space really needs to be built for still that traditional library model that folks are looking for, but also that the technology and the trends that we're seeing in the world.
Please.
I was just going to say, to add to that, as Hollie's talking about that digital transition, what's interesting is, your question about the community space and how, as we've gone more digital and we're communicating with each other, not in human form so much anymore, that for Cedar Rapids anyway is one of the most significant changes from 10 or 15 years ago. In the old building, there were meeting spaces. There was a Beams auditorium.
Yes.
But those meeting spaces were used by about 10,000 people a year. As soon as the new downtown library opened, we hit over 120,000 people a year using those meeting spaces. And so it's a place for the community to connect where there's not places like that anyplace else. Where we've lowered the entry point. Everyone is welcome. You don't have to pay to play.
Right.
You just get to come and be a part of it. And I think that it goes back to the way libraries were initially intended in the United States, and that's where we see the biggest significant spike in our usage numbers for the Cedar Rapids Public Library is that meeting room space alone, tenfold.
Absolutely. How do you, so talking about utilization, is this a national trend? I mean, I know we've seen it with the new library, within our own region, but is the use and utilization aligned nationally? What are some of those national trends?
And so the national trends, I would say the community space is huge, and Hollie can speak more about designing libraries and new spaces right now, but libraries, if you look at anything that's been designed in the last 10 years for sure, and even as you're looking forward, it's about designing spaces for people, and then the books and the information come around them. Libraries are being used so much more, like for most libraries, circulation is going down, but meeting room use and program attendance is going up because there's not a lot of places in the community that have free activities for all ages. There are learning activities and sometimes they're just fun, and we're librarians, and so we love a thing we call subversive learning, which is you're having a great time and you don't realize quite how much you're learning at the same time.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that for sure. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said libraries are about people, not about things, right? So people are coming to in early libraries, information was provided that no one could get access to in any other way, right? And now people come to the libraries to find information, to get that navigation from, the experts to know where to go and get the not fake news, but the real information, but also just to be in a place. We call it the third place. People, we need space for people to be. Not everybody is going to come into a public space and sit nice and cozy like we are here in a row, right? They want to kind of have some private space that they can get something off of the shelf and read and, be in a public space, kind of have that hum and the buzz of being out in public, but still having some private space too. So it's all about meeting the needs of everybody that comes in. Some people want to participate in a program and be, in that submersive environment. Some just kind of want to be in a space where other people are and people watch or just have that time to themselves to be out and about.
I think you'd be surprised at what takes place in the meeting spaces.
Yes.
Don't think meeting. Think birthday parties. Oh my gosh, think weddings. A couple of Saturdays ago when I was at the downtown library, and there was the most elaborate birthday party going on in the conference room in the children's area that, and I thought, okay, and I think there were 40 children that were invited to this party, and they came through the children's area of the library. So of course they, for many of them, maybe they hadn't been to the library before, and watching the little kids, looking around as they were walking into the birthday party, I thought, well, if you think this is great, wait till you see the party that's planned.
Right?
Really?
Yeah.
And so utilizing those spaces, there's no end to how our public spaces get used.
You do have, I'm sure, endless suggestion and endless opportunities. How do you balance that? How do you keep the balance of the access, the more traditional classic use with some of those pieces like the birthday parties, like the community events? Is it strategic planning? Is it public input? Is it staff? Is it a combination?
Yes.
Is it
Yes.
okay?
It's all of those things.
All of those things.
All the
Yeah.
above, right?
It's all of those things in the best balance we can, but the balance is driven by the community. And so, it's not our library, it's their library. And so what the community wants the library used for is what we let the library use for. The Cedar Rapids Public Library, and I believe this is true of Marion as well, the Board of Trustees have been adamant, especially since the new building was open, that the meeting room, as long as you are using those for whatever you want, during the times that the library is open, there is no charge to the patron because the community has already paid for their library. And that's a beautiful thing to be able to say, if you want your birthday party here, this is what your space is for. If you want your book club here, this is what your space is for. If you want to have a co-working space, it's yours. And so that balance is created by the community. We've just let the rooms be available, and you got to reserve it ahead of time or someone else will have it. When it comes to the programs and activities that we offer, that really is looking at other things that are happening in the community, trying to collaborate and balance the work of others. We see ourselves as a support system for many of the agencies and things, people doing great work in the community. How can we bolster the work that they're doing and make sure that things are as accessible to everyone in the community as possible? But it's, we're constantly changing what we offer based on people coming to us and saying, hey, what would be great?
Yeah.
Do a Renaissance fair in the middle of January at the library and watch 800 people show up, or have Tuba Christmas is one of our most successful programs every year, and it's literally almost 1,000 people show up and just listen to 100 tubas play, and that's nothing that the library did necessarily. It's the community saying, hey, we've got this great thing, you guys have a great space, can we come and do this together? And we say yes whenever we possibly can.
And the tuba concert is the best example of how much libraries have changed.
Oh, absolutely.
When you think of the library being the shush place, and then you think of a bunch of tubas playing in the library, and in the downtown Cedar Rapids Library, that space, it's a good cavernous space, and the sound just permeates the whole building. And
once a year, it's not all tubas all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Although people are going to walk in and being like, where are the tubas?
But once when we were having a board meeting of the Friends of the Library in the second floor conference room, and I could hear tabla music. And I thought, wow, how cool is this? When's this meeting going to be over? I want to go hear the tablas.
Sure.
So,
And the accordion club comes once a month too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more music at the
I've been
library
to their
than there used to be. That is
concerts.
a change.
it's terrific.
I would agree, obviously, with everything that Dara said, and all of what you think goes into creating this space. It's sort of that if you build it, they will come mentality, and so much has come from library space that I personally never would have imagined. For instance, we talk about the birthday parties and all the exciting things, but the need for public space for things such as supervised visits for children who are having supervised visits with their parents. There are not a lot of public places in Iowa in the wintertime where those types of critical meeting points are, these are crucial times for parents to get to have time with their kiddos. And what better place to do that than a library, where it's a learning experience, it's public, it's a place where everybody can be, and there's no,
Stigma.
you would never know that there's a supervised visit going on in the library because you're just coming in to do your business, right? People are not paying attention to what everybody's doing, but there are legal depositions happening. There are lots of social service interactions that are happening with, getting to homelessness resources. At Marion, we serve as a food distribution center for HACAP. So we hand out food. We have senior meals that are being served in our building. And, as you walk in and think, oh, there's a lot of things going on in the library today. It's humming. There's a lot happening. a lot of what happens, most folks don't pay close attention to, but they're very critical services and just interactions that are happening every day that there's no other place to do that besides a library.
And
in
you
a
know, the
community.
library has always been a satellite polling place, you know, during elections. Normally, if you want a location to be a satellite polling place, you have to apply, you have a petition signed. And when I spoke to the auditor's office, they said, we'll always have it at the library. You know.
It's a
And
go-to.
all Linn County libraries
Yeah.
are polling places.
places.
And in all Linn County libraries, you can register to vote.
Let's talk a little bit about inclusivity, because I think all of this leads to that access for all. And are there areas where perhaps there's growth opportunities? Are there areas where you're like, you know, we're falling short in being able to grant access or really truly be inclusive? It sounds like the programming and the opportunities and the environment are in place, but what are some of the realities of, have you identified certain audiences or certain members of the community that perhaps need a little bit more strategy in terms of how to pull them into this?
Yeah, I think we all have different needs in different places. I think, you know, we serve, we have a large senior population in Marion that we serve or are able to serve in our facility. We have a huge teen population that are very involved with the middle school, almost directly across the street. We have 50 to 65 teenagers that come in the afternoon, and we're working really hard to program and make sure that they're busy and are involved and connected to the library in the way that they want to be. So I just think as, you know, general population, those are things to think about, and I know that's a little bit different for Cedar Rapids, but we also are really focused on kind of that social services aspect that I was talking about. As Marion continues to grow, once you get to about the 50,000 mark in population, you really have to start thinking about having your own social services as a community. And so right now I kind of see us as the kind of the testing ground for what Marion is going to do moving forward. I'm leading a committee on homelessness right now in Marion with a cross section of the city and private and public partnerships, but really just trying to understand how we can serve the needs of everyone in Marion, so that they don't always feel like they have to come to Cedar Rapids or to other communities to find their service needs as well. So, you know, I think those are ways that we're trying to work on that. We have, as the Metro Library Network, have done a lot to create more access to library cards, to really think about, you know, what does it take, or what do you have to get a library card, and what does your library card mean, and how is that used, and so we've done a lot of work to make sure that anybody can get a library card. We can, you know, work with the kind of the restrictions or the privileges that you get with that library card behind the scenes, but we don't want to turn anybody away. Anybody that comes into the library can get a library card, and we want them to feel like they have the same access as anybody else when they come in.
And we've gone through a major strategic planning process in the last year to help us really identify some of these future needs and where we may be falling short. You know, libraries have something for everyone, but we can't be everything to everyone, and you know, there's a finite amount of resources, and so how do you find that balance? Where we're looking towards the future, we see some big needs for seniors in the community, especially with those that have transportation or access issues, and how do we partner with agencies already doing great things in the community and maybe build on their work to be able to get resources to people in need. Really, the west side where our Ladd Library is located, it is the fastest growing area in Cedar Rapids. The population is changing all the time over there, and there is a large growing African immigrant population where English is a second language, and so to be able to offer some human services to people and have ways for people to connect. And so we're working with Kirkwood and the United Way to open the Opportunity Center at the Ladd Library.
Excellent.
It'll open at the very end of February, so we're not quite there yet, but getting close to serve some of those needs in the best way we can by, again, building up the great work that others are doing.
Talk a little bit about, because just recently, Dara, the Cedar Rapids Public Library has been able to expand or go back to some of their hours, such as Sunday. So any instant reaction to that, or how are the numbers looking? I mean, obviously happiness, but
happiness and the numbers are looking great. You know, it's always a balance for our city leadership. The library is a tax-supported entity that has to, ultimately, our city council gets to make the decision how the library is funded versus how police and fire and public works and everything is a big picture. And we were so honored last year that they heard the citizens and said, man, people really love those Sundays downtown. Can we get that back? And so as soon as we opened them back up, people were waiting to get inside. And so we've seen great numbers so far. We're hopeful to continue to respond to community needs and offer the access that people are really looking for. Saturdays at LAD are highly, highly missed. And so we'll see what happens this year. But the community has been so supportive of the library with their actions, and more people just keep coming in.
How do you build the business case? So a lot of the conversation about the inclusivity really does require several partnerships, not only amongst your entities, but with other community sources. And from a layman's perspective of just, okay, why should we be so supportive? Why should we? I mean, we've built the case here today, but as far as maybe the perception of competing dollars, or why should the library be a priority versus other human service-based organizations? And we talked a little bit about Marion and how there really is the human service entity within Marion. But overall, how do you address that maybe that pushback?
Public library is a perfect example of taxation for the greater good, right? Like the individual can use it, but everyone in the community can use it. And so it is what a community does to show respect for itself, to show value in education, to show value in community, and in a belief that everyone deserves a chance. And so that's what government should be doing to serve the people.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a balance, right? And I'm sure you feel the same way. I'm certainly not going to go fight with the fire over should they have a new, critical position field versus the library field. I mean, there's always a balance between what the city needs and where those critical dollars need to go. But I 100% agree with Dara. It's a quality of life that I think cities and city councils and just the community in general want to have that for their community. We see time and time again and hear from patrons all the time. The library is the first place I go when I move to town. Like, that's the first place that I know when I come to town. Every town has a library. That is something constant that I can bring my kids to from where I was before and where I'm moving to. We always look for the public library first because that's just the core. It's that community center that everybody can connect with and everybody can relate to. So, really trying to strike that balance and be a part of the city and the budget, but understand, that we need the community to speak and help. That's why we're led by councils, and they get that information. But we all, I think, feel very passionate that the library is that core, that kind of the heartbeat of the community. That's where it's all those interactions are happening every day, and welcoming people to the city and pointing them in the right direction. So
it's not just the staff. I was going to say,
I
Libby,
would challenge you to find any other entity in the city that is more public than the public library, because it is everybody.
How do you, from the non-staff perspective, in terms of being that external champion with the Friends?
Well, and it's interesting for us because, our role in the relationship that we have with the library is to support the literacy programs. And we support the literacy programs with money, and we get that money by selling books, and those are used books, gently used books. And, we've often thought that it was hard to really pinpoint who our audience is, because sure, there are people that are looking for bargains. We all look for bargains. There are people that could not afford to buy a book in a retail establishment, but they can buy a book from us for $1, or they can come to our big sale, and on the third day they can buy a whole box of books for $8. And so access filters down to the work that we do too. And when you think of the families that would never have a library of their own were it not for access to good books, you know, at good prices, you know, we're proud that we're part of the greater good as well.
Hollie, I know you've been hitting the speaker circuit, just talking about expansion and your assessment of needing a bigger space and just what and how you and staff and everyone would utilize it. Where does the business case come into play as you're out and about and talking to groups about the next chapter for the Marion Library?
Sure. So I just let the stats talk a little bit when it comes to talking about, you know, as we've been talking about the community talks, when we start talking about the need. And for us, you know, we always talk about, we have an average of 1,000 people that come through our doors every day in Uptown Marion. We are a draw to during the day and all through the weekend to bring folks to Uptown, not just from Marion, but, you know, kind of that far east side of Cedar Rapids and some of the more of the rural areas on the east side of Marion. So, you know, I feel like we are very much a part of the vibrancy of the Uptown. But we also, you know, as you guys were talking about access, I could take the rest of the time to talk about this because I have been on the speaker circuit lately. But, you know, just recently we had, Vernon Middle School had kind of a scare, a gun scare, and they were on lockdown for a very short period of time, maybe about 25 minutes before the police came in and got everything secure. And my office is right by the front door. And I mean, the minute school got out, those kiddos were just, you could hear the roar coming from the school, and we are their first stop after school, and they were just besides themselves. And most of them had never gone through anything like that before. We got a notice from the PD ahead of time, just that something had happened in the city, so we were able to make sure that the teen librarians knew what happened. They were prepared. They were ready to talk to the kiddos about what happened. They didn't have the opportunity to go home and talk to a parent in the afternoon. So we're their first stop, right? Wow. And it was a really big, I've been talking about that a lot because we were there when
that's that environmental
portion of what they needed. And you know, it's just the community is growing. We've seen a huge population spike in Marion. We did a needs assessment on the library just about 6 years ago, and they came up with, you know, about 46,000 square feet that they were going to move the library into, and we've just updated our needs assessment, and we're up to 52,000 square feet now. That is our 2020 goal, and that is all due to usage and what people are doing when they come in. We have a New Year's Eve party similar to the one that they have in downtown Cedar Rapids, and last year we had 126 people come. We have a little clicker. We count everybody that comes, and we were able to contain that within our 2 meeting room spaces that we have for a public space. We had 356 people show up this year.
Wow. So you guys have a lot going on, both collaboratively and individually. As we have our last minute here before we wrap up, where can people go to either volunteer, learn about the different events? So Hollie?
Yeah, I would say the website is the best place to go. Okay. We have a lot of things going on, and all of our programming is out there and available. Come in, talk to anybody, we'll point you in the right direction, but the website's probably going to be the easiest, best way to get the information.
Absolutely.
For us too, crlibrary.org.
All right, and then Libby,
come to our book
volunteering,
sales,
absolutely.
First Saturday of every month, and the February book sale is coming up, and it'll be at the Cherry Building, so it'll be a bigger sale where we have our basement books store.
Well, there's a lot in store for 2019 when it comes to the library, when it comes to your collaborations and your individual programming. So thank you guys so much for joining us today, and hopefully I can't wait to hear about everything and see you guys at the library. So from all of us at Ethical Perspectives, we want to thank you for joining us, and go visit your public library. Obviously lots going on, and we'll see you next time.